What's up, everybody? It's the 20-game mark of the season, which means it's a great time to zoom out and reevaluate the team. Has Tyler Herro become the Heat's best player? What's up with Bam and Jimmy? And will any of the young guys emerge as an important piece going forward? Brendan Tobin from WQAM is here to help me talk through it. Let's jump in.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. David Ramil, my co-host, is off today. Got a great show for you today, though. Brendan Tobin from the Tobin and Leroy Show from 10 to 2 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday on WQAM is here to help us take a look at the Heat 20 games into the season. But first, Tobin, how are we feeling after the blowout win over the Lakers?
Oh, man, we were having a party today, which probably was a little bit overkill for beating a team that just lost by 30 and really seems like they're searching for themselves. But on the show, I've had a little bit of a nonsensical riff with JJ Redick, which is kind of what I took at the most solace. And I was like, oh, this is great. Because, you know, it was just like, I don't know. There was something about him over all these years with the podcast. Like, I really did enjoy his podcast, but then I'm just like, all right, he's everywhere. It's kind of like the McAfee thing. Like, he was basketball McAfee, like just all over the place. It's not that he doesn't do a good job. I'm just like, all right, dude, there's a little bit of, we get it. He knows basketball. He's the best with basketball. Everybody loves JJ Redick. And then what do you know? He gets to swoop in. Oh, he's got the best podcast. He's doing a podcast with LeBron. Right. And then all of a sudden he's LeBron's coach. And you're like, oh, I'm sure that's going to go swimmingly. I'm sure that's gonna go great. And, you know, funny enough, one of the things I actually found interesting with the Heat and a little bit surprising is like nobody on their coaching staff since Fizdale has really gotten a crack to host, to be a head coach anywhere, which I find surprising because normally people will go glom on towards the success. And I'm talking about like, you know, the rounds after they're making the, you know, Eastern Conference finals or the finals. And like nobody looked at the Heat staff and is like, oh, definitely this guy is a finalist. Like Chris Quinn's like in some circles and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So there were, you know, I did the whole pitted against Miami thing too, but that was the best part of today is just making fun of JJ Redick.
What's the, I'm all here for just making fun of people. That's always great content. There was, you know, I was talking to you on Media Row yesterday. I'm like, I think I got to go see JJ's post-game press conference. Like, I'm going to skip Eric Spoelstra's. I'm going to go right to JJ's. And he was asked, you know, what's your message to the team after the game? And there's a showmanship to JJ Redick in the post-game presser. And he just sort of pauses for 10 full seconds in a press conference. For 10 full seconds of silence with his eyes closed, rubbing his temple, really giving this question some serious thought, you know, and then gave you just some sort of answer. Who cares? And then so I was like, all right, that's kind of interesting. His post-game pressers have been very fun. I didn't think I thought he was going to rip into the team. He didn't. He was cool, calm, and collected, or at least tried to be. And then that was that. I don't know what's that? How's that saying go? It's like you hear it all the time. Like no matter how bad you think you have it in the NBA, never underestimate the other team's problems. And the Heat coming off of that Boston Celtics blowout, doing basically the same thing to the Lakers. It's like, oh, if you thought the Heat were in bad shape, this Lakers thing does not feel good right now.
Yeah, and I think there's it's funny because you and I are like, you know, boots on the ground and we're kind of in the midst of it. So, you know, we just kind of get numb, I think, to the Heat struggles. But it is what it is. They're right now in the midst of football season and the diet of the national sports pantheon. There's really only 1-2 teams that can stop the sports calendar and get influence on a creeping into football Thursday, and the Lakers are one of them. And so especially so for the Heat to put them into the national spotlight just like they did with Philly, they've kind of been you know, two of the better moments for the season, even though the Heat are definitely meandered in their own issues. It's fun because there's the ties to both teams. There's the past with the teams, with the Philly stuff and the LA stuff. So while they've been two very fun moments, I don't necessarily know how impressive the wins are for Miami, but they've been very fun.
So I do want to just kind of zoom out, talk about the Heat more at the 20-game mark. But first, a quick reminder, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also a reminder that your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat Daily Newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage, delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. All right, like I said, 20 games into the season, this is the time that front offices around the league typically will take a step back, look themselves in the mirror, reevaluate their team. So I thought we could do a bit of that here for the Miami Heat. They're 10-10. Some things have not gone as planned. I think that's fair to say. I've got 4 storylines that have emerged over these first 20 games. These are the things that I kind of keep hitting, and I want to talk them out with you. But I'll start on a positive note. We'll start with Tyler Herro, who is having a career year, 24 points per game, shooting the snot out of the ball from three-point range. He's second in the league, or third in the league, I think, in three-pointers made per game behind Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. And that's only because LaMelo Ball takes like 80 shots a game. Like among the top three-point shooters in the league, it's like only Anthony Edwards is better by percentage at the same volume. And we're talking about like tenths of a percentage. Like all the love Anthony Edwards gets from his new pull-up jump shot, Tyler Herro should be getting that same love because it's virtually the same. And he's now kind of laying the groundwork for, I think, what could be an all-star push here. So what have you thought about Tyler this season?
Well, I think the first thing, and I've made this point on shows before, but I think the first thing that was noticeable just basically from the jump is I just feel like the player himself mentally has just come into the season lighter as far as like he doesn't seem burdened by anything. I think that, you know, for everything that he's been through, there were no real trade rumors this offseason, and maybe there's just growth, and he's going to be 25 in January. So maybe that's just genuinely, you know, people have put the word maturity to it. I don't necessarily see it as maturity because I've never found Tyler to be an immature person other than maybe like social media rabbit ears from time to time. But I do think that the kid seems to, you know, just seem like he's got just a happiness to him, win or lose. Like he doesn't seem to sweat anything as much as maybe he used to. And that's been noticeable from his game standpoint. You know, first of all, I think he's leaned into something that Spo's wanted for a long time, which is you're one of the best shooters in the league. Please shoot more threes and shoot them everywhere and anywhere at your leisure. And as much as we all love the baby float, and it's a great shot and he works very hard on it, like we would like you to take all the 4 baby floats and make them, you know, baby bombs. Like just go anywhere and shoot them all over the place, please. And so there's been that, but I will give him credit. Like this is for sure the most I've seen him fight through contact, get to the rim. Like he just doesn't settle. And I think that that's been the great thing about watching him.
He's totally done a 180 in terms of the player he is on the court, right? Now, you could even say like the mindset. I remember talking with him in Boca Raton on the FAU campus last training camp, because obviously there were the Bahamas this one. And sitting down with him for a story I was writing, and he had such an FU attitude after being involved in the Damian Lillard trade rumors and stuff. And he was like, I don't care about that stuff. I'm just going to take care. Like, I'm just going to go out and be the player who I know. And I kind of fall in love with that stuff. Like, I'm a sucker for that. Like, I grew up with Kevin Garnett and Kobe and Dwayne Wade and all these guys who were just like, FU attitude, burn the world to the ground. This is where I go. And so I like, that's kind of my thing. And I was like, all right, like I left that conversation with Tyler, like pumped. I'm like ready for this Tyler Herro season. And by the way, he started great before the injuries kind of settled in. And then we're there at media day, and he's just talking about whatever the team needs me to do. I don't care. Come off the bench, whatever. I'm going to shoot more threes. And we're like, whoa, just like the mindset change, shaved his head. Like everything was just different about this guy. And then on the court, his shot chart is completely transformed. The mid-range shot is basically, I looked it up, 16 mid-range shots per game. Or I'm sorry, 16 mid-range shots for the season. Wow. Tyler Herro has shot. That's not a lot. That's less than a mid-range shot per game, where he was averaging more than 3 mid-range shots per game last year. And so he basically just said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And he's just taking threes. I mean, his shot chart looks like Steph Curry's. Like it straight up just looks like Steph Curry's, and he's hitting him at this rate. So is it fair to call him now Miami's best? I hesitate to go best player, but best offensive player, averaging 24 a game?
I think, like, look, if for a 10-10, like it's definitely, I think, fair to say that he's been their best player. First of all, he's played every game. I think it's not, and for people who would look and say, well, typical Tyler Herro game, he put up a bunch of numbers, but they didn't score. Like, first of all, the Heat have had a lot of games this year that basically have been coin flips. And those have also been basically only coin flips because Tyler Herro has maybe brought them out of the muck. I've loved how many great second halves it seems like he's had this year where like, hey, maybe it's not there. It doesn't matter. He's going to turn it around and then can just take over a quarter. The Heat have needed that. They needed that infection of offense. So I think it is fair. While the Heat have, two other stars who are two-way guys who are maybe more well-rounded, and while Tyler's never going to be an all-world defender, he does compete. Jimmy said that this year, like he's taken on the challenge. So I think it's completely fair to say that he's been the best player this year.
It's pretty wild. I mean, if he keeps this up, which I think he's going to, in terms of the scoring, he's going to be Miami's first scorer to average more than 23 points since LeBron in 2014.
Yeah.
And like 23 points is not a high bar in today's NBA. Like we're talking like there's teams that have multiple players scoring 23 points per game for a season. So the offensive drought in Miami, in other words, has been real. And, Jimmy Butler's a guy who can do it in the playoffs, but he typically averages 20, 21 points per game in the regular season. So Tyler's kind of just out here doing something that we haven't seen here in a very long time. On the flip side, Bam Adebayo, not so much on the offensive end. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about Bam, what you're seeing there, if you're worried. Then we'll talk about Jimmy Butler. We're going to do all of that and more coming up here on Locked On Heat. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for just $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. We'll be right back. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Support the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. On the flip side of this whole thing, Bam Adebayo is averaging basically career lows since becoming a full-time starter in points. His shooting percentages are down. We all know the struggles. It's well documented. What are you seeing from him out there?
It's just, there's definitely been just an element of him missing shots. I do agree with that. Like, I asked him a little bit about that last night in the locker room, and he said there's no clearing of the mechanism. I said the shots were just going to go in. He's like, I'm not overthinking it. Which is, kind of par for Bam's personality. I don't think he's a guy that will ever get too high or too low. He's very matter of fact. I definitely feel like I felt like this is definitely a guy who got in his own head. Even Tyler said this yesterday. I asked him about it because I think Tyler said a really great thing after, it was the Boston game where he's like, I don't think that he's struggling. I think he's playing good basketball. He's just not making shots. And so, but look, we're guilty of it. We all get excited of the Bam 3-point revolution. We've been waiting for it. We've been hoping for it because there's an element like the Heat. It's impossible to ignore that over the years he has been looked upon as the torchbearer of the next culture guy. Even D Wade's mentioning him in his speech and not his close friend Jimmy Butler at the statue ceremony. It just is what it is, and so it carries this responsibility, and it carried like everybody was going to have high expectations of it. And it just got off to a rough start. And then I felt like you watch these games early on where he wasn't even shooting threes or he'd really hesitate. So that looked like it was, starting to get off to a slow start. Then you had the game in Mexico City that he kind of got going. Then there'd be games he just couldn't make a bunny. There'd be the games like against Nurkic where, he's dealing with this Bosnian moose that he has to go wrangle. And I think there's this element of to him. Maybe he was hoping that they'd be playing with a little bit more size with Nico out there. That obviously flamed out. So then he has to go and do all the big man stuff again. And so I think he probably came into the year thinking, I'm going to be a little bit more free, a little bit more loose. And now it's just gone to, there was a shooting slump. Then there was responsibility changes and, then the chitter chatter starts and all that. So I just think that maybe the team, or maybe he had too high of expectations of what the takeover was going to look like, and maybe got outside himself a little bit more. I'm not an excuse making. Like, look, you're the guy that got the max extension. That's what comes with the territory. They have high expectations of you, and so do the fans. And I think the one thing that with him that, Spo's always going to give him the okay on, because he obviously does a lot of things that unlock what Erik Spoelstra wants to do, is cool. But from the Tyler Herro's perspective of, hey, it's about buckets, it's about who can take over certain parts of the game. We've only seen probably 2 games like that from him this year. The Pacers one comes to mind, where they were already kind of in hand, and he put kind of a death knell in that game. So I just think with him, there's part of it that's just, hey, he's missing shots. I think a little bit of it is the responsibility, the bearing of it, and then how the roster changed, and he's kind of the ultimate, like, if there's a problem over here, he's got to go over here to fix it. And so I think there's been a little bit of an element of that as well, but I definitely has been substandard. I think that's fair to say. It has not been up to what I expected. It's not been up to, I think, probably what he's expected. But I also don't think it's dead. I think that, the more as the games have gone on, I felt like it's just been, he's just missing. Now he's starting to miss stuff that's just always been in his wheelhouse.
Right.
Whereas earlier on in the season, I felt like he just looked a little bit lost, and a bit gun shy at times.
I agree with that. There was a game earlier in the year where he got the ball in that mid-range area where that's his sweet spot, right? That free throw line jumper. He loves to step into that one dribble pull up. And he did the one dribble, and he did a half pull up, and then sort of just did this like weird kind of pump fake, because Erik Spoelstra obviously doesn't want the team taking as many mid-range shots. So you could see like him hearing Erik Spoelstra's voice in his head, like, no more mid-range shots. Like these aren't good anymore. And he's just sort of hesitates with it just long enough where the opposing player just slaps the ball out of his hands and it's a turnover, as opposed to him just getting into his sweet spot. He started to just take those shots now. I looked it up. Like, he was shooting 51% on those shots last year. It's 36% this year. That's going to go back up. He's not a 36% shooter from that area. Yeah. He's more of a 45 to 50% shooter. So I think that'll go up. The expectations, I think, is a great point, because I think everybody expected like a leap from this guy. Like, he's going to, like, there's going to be this offensive leap that coincides with becoming a 3-point shooter and all that stuff. And I think all that pressure did really get to him earlier in the year. If he just is what he was, which was a defensive player of the year, perennial candidate, and a 20-point per game scorer who can also average 4 or 5 assists per game, that is worth the max contract. Like, that is still one of the best 15 to 20 players in the NBA any given season. If you could just kind of just be you, and especially if Tyler Herro is this offensively, that makes him just sort of being like a 20-point per game scorer. If Tyler's going to be a 25-point per game scorer, all of a sudden that makes a little bit more sense, right? And so
and it's interesting because, Tyler said that thing yesterday where he's like, be what he literally is, which is one of the top 3 centers in the league. Yep. But the funny thing is, I kind of think Bam liked the idea of, like, I don't know, maybe I can get away from the center thing a little bit this year. And he can't. Like, it's kind of one of those things, like, the Heat can't quit Bam at center. And I know it makes every Heat fan nutty because they think he's a power forward, but he's not. He's Erik Spoelstra's center. And people got to just get under the mindset of, this is your Chris Bosh. You need to just kind of embrace that. And I'm not saying that he's not better than Chris Bosh, but, like, that's what he is. He's going to be that until otherwise, and until Kel'el Ware is out of South Dakota jail and is allowed to, make his mistakes, or Nico, like, you guys see it. The writing's on the wall, and that just is what it is. And I think that he probably thought a little of that too. Maybe he thought, oh, we got this young kid. I'm going to get to play. Nico's going to be stronger. He's playing in the Olympics. And, those guys, Spo does not deem them worthy. And one thing that comes with the max contract, and you're the Heat culture guy, is please just do what I ask you to do. And please just fill the roles, and that I love you. And that's what it is with the coach. So, and
it wasn't for a lack of trying, right? Like, they tried Nico, it didn't work. He wasn't rebounding. Like, he was a big man in size only, but not in the way he played. They even, after that, they tried Kevin Love. Kevin Love was guarding centers after that, and Bam was playing power forward, and it didn't work because Kevin Love is a million years old, and it just doesn't work anymore defensively with him that way. They just don't have that guy, and so we'll see. You mentioned Kel'el Ware. I want to talk about him in a second, but before we do that, Jimmy Butler. You got Brian Windhorst saying he's going to be in kill mode, whatever, expecting maybe a contract year since he can opt out this coming offseason. I'm getting to the point now where, I keep saying this on the show, but, like, want to and able to are two different things. And at 35 years old, maybe he's just not able to have this career year. And I think that's okay. Not everybody has to age like LeBron James. Like, it's totally fine. Like, at this stage of his career, Dwayne Wade was coming off the bench for the Heat, right? It was just, you look different at 35 years old than you did at 31 years old. But what are you expecting from, like, I'll ask you point blank. Like, Jimmy Butler, he's got an option for $53 million next year. Why would you turn that down at this point?
If you're him, you don't think anybody will pay him crazy money?
I mean, how many years? Like, if you can get let's call it 30 million, so 60 million over 2 years. Like, you're still.
I think somebody would definitely pay. Because you see, here's the
sure,
thing,
but
Wes.
like you're leaving 52. Like, it takes you 2 years to basically make what you would be making in a year if you just picked up the option.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess I jumped in there too quickly. Then I would say some owner's gonna pay him crazy money if they think they have the option to get him, because there's just not that many guys of his caliber in the playoffs that can make a difference. I mean, they would look. The Clippers paid Kawhi Leonard how much money? Zion Williamson got $200 million. Like, I just think the money's just so crazy, and there's not that many guys who are, as Pat Riley calls them, the needle mover, that would become available. The one thing I would say to him, look, there's definitely been the thing that when he's at his best, when he is able to dial it up, it's still there. And the thing that I've been most pleased with is he can still get to the free throw line like a demon. And that I was worried that was going to fall off a cliff. I'm like, because I don't know how much more he's going to want to do that. He shot more threes last year. That's not been the case. He's basically thrown the threes in the trash, and he's basically put head down. I'm going to get to the free throw line and be the most efficient I can. You mentioned D Wade. It's a great comparison because D Wade, it became more of a once every 3 games kind of thing with him. And I think one of the things that's probably a miss from the Heat and from Jimmy's side is everybody got a little too sensitive with he's got to be out there for every game. Like, for example, I would have never played him in the Toronto game. They should have sat him that game and had him ready for Boston. And I'm not playing the result. I said that going in. I said normal years, there's no shot he plays the front end of that back-to-back. Right. But it's because they want him out there for every game, and clearly hasn't felt right. You remember the Charlotte game where he basically looked like a corpse, like he couldn't move. And so, like, if there's those nights, I'm for the Heat sitting him, because he said a very wise thing in camp where he said, it doesn't matter what I do right now anyway. And he's right. Jimmy Butler could go score 60 points. He could go average, 30 for the season. And if the Heat get bounced in the first round, they're not paying him an extension. The only way that really he gets it is if they get back to the finals. Let's be real about it. So I don't understand this need from him, his agent, or the team all feeling like if he can walk, he's got to be out there. Why? He's not been that in 6 years. You think he's going to be a 70-game player? He typically misses the 15 games at the start of the season. Oddly enough, it's usually a first half thing. And then he kind of bears into this Jimmy playoff mode thing. It got a little screwy last year because some more things popped up, and maybe that happens with age. But I don't understand why we've deterred completely from what has been his past. And it just felt like they were trying to win something. But the other comparison to D Wade, maybe Tyler's taken this mantle that I don't know if the Heat have it yet, because I think truly beating the better teams or have looked their best, they've still needed him to be that guy. They've still needed Jimmy to be that guy. And with D Wade, even in those last couple of years, as much as they had Jay Rich or they had Dion or Goran, it was still D Wade at the end. And so I still feel like for the Heat, still the go-to guy is Jimmy Butler, but I don't think he can summon the powers as much because that's just what age is.
I agree, right? And that's why I think you do. I think you're exactly right. Like, just let him, like, the back-to-back. It's fine. The guy's 35 years old. It's okay. And if he's a 1 every 3 game player, I say this all the time on the show. I'm like, if he shows up once a week with like big time Jimmy Butler stuff, that's okay. And then if he's just sort of, the one thing he can't do is be what he was in Charlotte, which is just standing in the corner, right? And obviously there was like the back was killing him and all that kind of stuff. And so just making sure that he's not being reduced to that and maintaining his body. If he needs a night off, that's fine. But every time he's out there, even like last night against the Lakers, he was sort of point guard Jimmy, getting guys involved, but like on the ball, like very clearly on the ball all the time. I don't need like 27 points per game from Jimmy Butler. I just need Jimmy kind of conducting the offense and doing that stuff. And that makes things easier for Bam, makes things easier for Tyler. And all of a sudden now your best 3 players are taking control of the game. So I think we're in total alignment there. It'll be fascinating to see what happens with this contract, though, because I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, me neither. It was interesting seeing the national reports this week and saying that, and I don't know who to believe or what not to believe, but this, I guess, one from, I don't know, is it Scotto or Scotto? I don't know how to say his name. Scotto. Okay, so his was like the word is the Heat won't resolve it till the end of till the summer, and I'm kind of curious. Like, all right, well, what is the pivot point then? Like, so if they go in the dumps, are they for sure not going to trade them? Is anybody going to come knocking with a deal that knocks the Heat socks off? Is that possible? Like if Houston thinks they are for real, I don't know. I don't know what the team is, but right. I found that interesting too. But, I part of me does kind of feel like, yeah, the Heat aren't going to go out like that. They're not going to do a trade like that and wave the flag. I feel like they kind of want to give the Jimmy send off, just go basically fire all the bullets until it's completely empty.
It would have to be like a real deal that just makes too much sense, or the Heat would just have to be whatever, like 8 games under 500 by February. But I believe Scotto I think that was the intent going into the year with the Heat was let's kick the can down the road. We'll just figure it out next summer. No big deal. But, things change over the course of a season. And then, if the Heat are in a really bad way by the deadline in February, maybe that's something that kind of changes the way they're thinking about things. But for now, they're 10-10 through 20 games. I don't think that they're really thinking that way just yet. So we'll see what happens. I want to ask you about the young guys, and then we have a little game of what would you do. We'll do that next year on Locked On Heat. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm going to play a couple more games at you before we get you out of here. This first one is called Glass Half Empty and Glass Half Full. And I'm going to present to you the young guys. Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic, Kel'el Ware, Pelle Larsson, Keshad Johnson, like the whole Vegas group. Give me your glass half full version when you look at these guys.
I mean, my glass half full version is I probably think that they're too good because I really want them to play more. I think I'm a big Nico guy. I think that's probably the thing that has me the most frustrated right now is like I'm watching Kevin Love every night and I know he's the end all be all connector of everything. I think Nico should play above him. I just feel like I loved Nico coming off the bench. I thought that there was like they found something there with him. I mean, it's arguably their best win of the season, and he was huge and he looked like he had a spark and his nose got broken. And I don't know. I think for him to be just completely banished is crazy to me. Especially with the connection he has with Jimmy. I feel like Nico in that role, especially, man, I just think that Kevin, he's another one like Jimmy, like he kind of looks like he can give it to you like maybe twice a week, maybe once a week. So that one to me is probably the one that I have most frustrated. Jaime's looking a little bit more like himself.
This has been the best 5-game stretch of
sure.
the season. He's averaging like 12 points per game over the last 5. Yeah,
he's looking more like himself. I think it's probably a little behind what people thought he was going to do this year. Yeah. But so that I think Jaime's maybe the most surprising to me because I was like, yeah, I kind of thought like he'd always have his time to shine. I don't necessarily know that's been the case. And it probably has something to do with, they've had to figure out what's gone on with Rozier. So that's kind of deterred. Like, so if I had to say the two guys who are kind of holding things up, it's probably Kevin and Terry holding young guys back. And if you had to say, hey, would you want young guys to play or would you want those guys to play? I'm a guy who kind of wants the new thing. I'm always the guy who wants to see the shiny new thing. So I would lean the young, but I get it. What are you supposed to do? You gave up a first-round pick for Terry Rozier, and Kevin Love is the locker room leader. So suppose kind of stuck right there right now. Pelle has been incredible. not really surprised by it because he's kind of just playing like he did for the summer league team, and that was the book on him coming in. And I'm not really surprised that Kalel's out in the cold because it's a young big and Spo doesn't play those.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I get why Spo is going with Kevin Love is just his rebounding, right? And that's the one thing with Nico that the coaching staff always gets on him on is you've got to be more of an active rebounder. And Miami's rebounding rate was in the toilet when Kevin Love was hurt to start the year, and he comes back, and now they're a good rebounding team again. And as long as that's the case, I think Eric Spoelstra is just going to keep Kevin Love as the backup center. But I'm with you. I think they could find time. I liked when they were kind of finding spot minutes for Nico at the backup 5, and even spot minutes for Kalel at the 5 also. Like last night, or was it last night or against Boston? I don't know. There was a play where, no, it was both games actually. It was Boston and the Lakers, even though they blew out the Lakers, where, like somebody's driving on the Heat and Kevin Love doesn't even bother to contest anymore because I think he's so worried about drawing a foul. But like he doesn't really even put his hands up at the rim anymore. And just having like that 7-foot fly swatter that is Kalel Ware just out there, I feel like could just be really helpful to the defense, even if it was just for a few minutes a game. So we'll see. But like they're in the doghouse. Like Eric Spoelstra is going to publicly praise these guys as much. He doesn't bash guys to the media ever, basically. But they're clearly in the doghouse right now and he's trying to send them a message. So we'll see if it works. But I kind of look at these young guys. So, my wife and I, we moved apartments last month, and it's interesting when you're moving, right? Because you have to kind of take stock of what you have, and you're like, all right, and you kind of have conversations. Are we keeping this thing? Are we getting rid of this? Are we donating that? Like whatever. And I kind of was starting to think about like Miami's young guys. And if you were moving, like how many of these young guys, like, yes, it's your young guys. You've spent time with them. You're used to them. They've been in your apartment for so long. Like it would be weird if they weren't there anymore. But like if you were really moving, or like in the NBA terms, if you were starting a new team, how many of these young guys would you be like, we're not even having a conversation, they're coming with us. Like this is the family heirloom. Like there's no conversation about it. These are requirements. And I don't know that I feel that way about any of the Miami young guys based on what we saw so far.
I'm a pack rat, so it's hard for me. Like my wife will tell you, it's hard for me to let go of stuff. Like I have boxes of useless stuff, so I'm
the same way.
I'm gonna have a hard time parting with stuff having to go. Because it's like this is the interesting thing, right? They have two guys, and almost like Pella's in a way kind of impeded Jaime because he's kind of doing all the cut stuff. Is a little bit better of a spot up shooter, and so like it's kind of made you forget about Jaime. But I feel like at their ceiling, I think Jaime's a better player,
no doubt.
So it's kind of an interesting thing there with it. It's like, well, I do need a toaster. Like I can't not have toast, but it's like, well, do I need to eat as much bread in the morning? Maybe I don't, so it's one of those things where I think that there's not really a guy where I'm like, this kid's going to suck. Like I don't even feel that way with Nico. Like I say that as somebody who knows that I have an affinity for the young man and think that, he is talented and still very young, by the way. But I don't know. I think probably if I had to say one that I'm like worried about, it's probably Kalel, because I'm like, all right, what is he going to have to do? How long is this process going to be before Eric Spoelstra trusts him?
Right. And there is no like proof of concept. Like we've seen Nikola Jovic be good in the NBA. We've seen Jaime, obviously. We've seen all these guys be good in the NBA. We haven't seen Kalel Ware be good in the NBA because he hasn't really gotten the chance, and maybe he won't be good in the NBA. Like I also kind of like we always give credit to this coaching staff for developing these guys and having the best developmental system in the NBA. And then when he's not playing a young guy, we're like, what the hell is wrong with these people? So I'm like, I do sort of defer to them on this because they obviously know more than we do. But it would be nice to know if Kalel Ware can play or not, especially when you've got like Yves Missi in New Orleans playing. You got Zach Edey when he's healthy contributing in Memphis. And it's like, okay, these are the other first round centers and this guy can't get on the floor. Like what gives? So I don't know. I mean, they also knew he was raw coming out. Like that was sort of the word on him. So and maybe it's just part of that. Yeah.
And I think probably the thing on him too is he's more of an offensive player. Like he's more known for his skills and that. And look, you're a backup big for Spo. You're gonna have to defend and be nails and do all of that stuff before he even thinks about you scoring. That's exactly what got Bam Adebayo on the floor. And that's I think the thing with him and with Nico is these are both bigs, but they're offensive bigs. Like they lean and they're different because like Nico leans. I honestly think he's probably more of a point forward of anything else. Like if he really had his ways, like ball in his hands, make crazy passes. So that's the thing is they are both bigs and the Heat needs size, but I don't necessarily, but they're not necessarily their head coach's cup of tea, especially on a team that needs role guys. And that's why Pella's playing is because they need guys to fill a role. He perfectly fits a role. He's a dog defensively. The kid is very stout. They'll put him up physically with a lot of these people.
He makes quick decisions. He's he's one of those connecting pieces. It's like, this lineup makes sense with him in it. Don't even think about it. Like I don't have to change anything. Yeah.
So even though he's maybe, I hate to say this because I don't, I'm not a scout, but I'm like, even though he probably has like the lowest ceiling out of the four guys, right now his floor is exactly where they need him to be. So that's what's getting him out there.
The one thing I'll say, like every time you talk to like the coaching staff or anybody about Khalil Ware, they always kind of go back to, oh, he's doing great work behind the scenes, all this stuff, and it's like, well, what's the thing what are we working on here? And it's always defensive positioning and pick and roll coverage. And I'm like, this is basic stuff, like standing in the right place on defense and pick and roll coverage, like that's what we're working on. And that's the part where I'm like, this might be a little bit of a slower roll than we think, but at the same time, I'd love to be proven wrong. My expectations of what it was coming off of Summer League to like what we've seen these first 20 games, I'm like, I'm not expecting anything from this guy as a rookie because I just don't want to. I don't want to be disappointed, right? Because I think we were all sort of disappointed the way these first 20 games went. I would love to be wrong. I would love for him to like kind of blow away my expectations, but at this point, like I'm tempering them down based on what the team has said about it. So we'll see. Last thing here, what would you do is what we're calling this segment. Anybody that follows you knows you're very much a family man. So here's my question to you. Let's say the season's over. Jimmy Butler reaches out. And he's like, Tobin, I love your questions. I love your radio show. I actually want you to come with me to Spain. I want you to travel the world with me for a month. I want you to come on the Jimmy Butler Express, and we're going to do this thing. You're going to be part of the crew for a month, but only you can come, right? Because it's like we have limited space. What are you doing? What are you telling your wife? Like, how does this go down?
If I went to Spain for a month without my wife, I wouldn't have a wife when I came back. It's like, if you want to talk about like the number one dream destination of Mrs. Tobin, it's Spain. So if I were to pull this off, I would have to lie to her and say, I'm going to Russia.
Right.
I would not say I was going to Spain. So I would have to hide off of Jimmy Butler's Instagram, which is impossible because it seems like he's got 9 photographers following him at all times and following his every movement to pick the best 7 pictures of the day. So I would have to say, Jimmy, there's no way this happens without Mrs. Tobin coming on the trip because I will not have a wife when I come back. But all love to you, dude. I hope you have the best time.
But then you have like ultimate brownie point. Like this guy invited me on a trip of a lifetime, and I said no for you. Like brownie points, like endless brownie points, right?
Yes, but I also feel like the response would be, you couldn't convince him to bring me on the trip too. Like I think that would also be part of it because she wants the free month trip to Spain.
You almost
and then the other thing is like, well, then what do we do with the 2 kids for a month? And they're old enough where like they could probably handle it. Especially the 12-year-old, like they could be with grandmas. They could split between the grandmas.
You had a toaster.
Yeah, they can figure that out. But
eat bread for every meal.
No, when you said like immediately, if you said like if you told me any other country, I feel like I could maybe finagle this and being like, this is going to be incredible. Right. Do I get to make content when I'm there, or do I just get to hang out with Jimmy Butler? Can I put this into this is going to be a professional benefit that no one else is going to have?
Yeah, I think. Okay,
or so I get to enjoy Spain.
No, let's instead of Spain, let's call it like Germany or whatever. I don't care. But yeah, maybe I don't know. It depends. I guess that's up to Jimmy. He's like, no, like you're in the middle of like recording a video. And he's like, Jimmy, hey, we're playing dominoes right now. Get out here. Like,
Yeah, if it's up to Jimmy, then probably no, because that's going to be like, a coin flip on what his mood is of the day. Is the Art Basel going on in Germany? I don't know, dude. Like, so I would say probably not, dude. I would say probably not. Maybe if it was Dwayne Wade, maybe it's another story.
That's true. That's a great point. Tobin, thanks so much for joining me. Always fun talking with you. We talk Heat all the time in person, but nice doing it on the show every once in a while. Really appreciate the time, man.
You got it, buddy. Anytime you need me.